Auctions are a curious thing. We did well last night, over $9,000. Nice showing, very good. A lot of fun. But auctions themselves are a curious thing. They take the most raw bits of capitalism and democracy and mash them together in an event that is part public, part private, part shouted, part written, and all flavored with a little bit of strategy and subterfuge. It's part town meeting and part economic free-for-all. And the results are sometimes goofy and unexpected. A sermon on a topic chosen by the winning bidder might go for $5 or it might go for $500. An antique glass something goes for pennies on the dollar of its actual worth, and sometimes competing bidders will drive up the price of a beat-up item of questionable value in their effort to cause grief to one another. It is an interesting study in human behavior, the psychology of people in groups, the sociology in action. In a logical world, the items worth the most money would draw the highest bids. But that's not what happens at an auction. People develop emotions, sometimes strong emotions, about the purchase of a particular item, causing them to spend truly outsized amounts of money to get it. Sometimes, if an item does not have a lot of sparkle or pizzazz, a bidder who acts calm and relatively disinterested can walk off with a real bargain. Richard Thaler recently won the Nobel Prize in Economics for his work integrating human psychology with economic behavior. Thaler made his legacy statement by comparing how people's emotional attachment, how we assign value to a thing, as having significantly more influence than simple reason when it comes to making economic decisions. Even to the point where we will make economic choices that are directly in our own worst interests because of the emotions we have and judgments we make around that decision. In fact, if we are applying this thing called the fairness principle that Thaler talks about, he says we are likely to exhibit one or more of three preferences in our interactions. One, some individuals will behave fairly towards others, even in anonymous settings without reputational concerns. Two, some individuals are willing to forego resources to punish an individual that behaved unfairly toward them. And three, some individuals are willing to forego resources to punish unfair behavior and norm violations, even if the unfair behavior was directed at someone else. I think that final point can be extrapolated to include the notion that people will endure pain and suffering for themselves in order to make a statement about how they dislike someone or something. I recently read an article in the online magazine Politico by journalist Michael Kruse, who offered a curious application of this very phenomenon to the field of politics instead of economics. He interviewed a group of people in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. It's a coal town. And he writes, "Johnstown voters did not intend to hold the president accountable for the non-negotiable pledges he made to them. It's not that the people who made Trump president have generously moved the goalposts for him. It's that they have eliminated the goalposts altogether." They're willing to take a hit to make a statement. So, in a different auction this week, in an online auction, I bought some furniture to furnish my new home. And I was blessed to have Aaron help me schlep it all back. I got a very nice love seat for $35, right? I paid the same price for a matching armchair, similar amounts end tables and coffee tables and all that sort of thing, and some nice dining room chairs. The dining room chairs, now this is one of those things where if you don't act too terribly interested, 6 high-back upholstered dining room chairs for $15. The people who got the rest of the dining room set were a little cranked that I got their chairs, but I was like, you could have bid $20. So anyway, I have these really nice chairs. So here's the weird thing, though, that happened. As I scrolled through the catalog and I made a list of the things that I might like to get, once I wrote them down, I noticed that their importance grew. Like, I hadn't known about them in 2 hours before, but now I had to have them. And it was weird to watch things jump in price. These little dinky coffee tables with these not quite attractive lamps went for more than I paid for a love seat. And I wondered, what is it about these things that make them that valuable that people are willing to step up and step up and step up and step up the amount of their bids? When our emotions get engaged, and not just in economics, but when our emotions get engaged, our logic seems to take a back seat. And with my adventure in furniture shopping, I bought mostly stuff I needed to furnish my new home. I got some weird stuff too. Box lots are always a crapshoot. But as I was bidding in the final minutes of the auction, I was aware of this feeling of heightened anxiety and excitement I'm sitting in my recliner. And I'm a bundle of nerves because somebody might outbid me for $15 on these chairs. And I was aware of this anxiety and excitement and my impulse to keep raising my bid to win. And I confess that I got almost all the things that I wanted. But I did not go over my preset limit, so that's good. On the other hand, I'm not sure how rational I was when I set that limit. So this is real stuff, how we apply value. And academics have written about it for centuries, for millennia. And humans have tried to figure out and bargained and traded for goods and services, not unlike what we saw last night at the auction. And the value of a thing depends on a lot of factors, including standard market forces of supply and demand, yes. And demand is the wild card. Demand hinges upon the value we place on something. Now, our nation, much like the rest of Western civilization, has been wrestling with the falsely competing values of security and freedom. Benjamin Franklin famously said, "Those who give up freedom for security deserve neither." So we hold very dear our constitutional rights and freedoms. Our general understanding of the limits of individual rights is that my rights end at the point where they begin to infringe upon yours, right? That's pretty reasonable. And yet, we have proven time and again that we value some rights to the point where they do great harm to some folks. We value the Second Amendment. We value the Second Amendment rights of gun owners to stockpile weapons of mass killing potential over the lives of children in schools, customers in movie theaters, kids in high school cafeterias, little children in classrooms, and worshipers in a little Baptist church in Texas. I wonder what would happen if we took stock of what we have. I mean, I really took stock of real assets, our health, our bodies, time with family, our minds, our comfort, our security, education, our freedoms, and our independence. What would happen if we deeply considered all of those things and then considered what price we are willing to pay to have them? Or, on the flip side, consider which of them we would sacrifice in pursuit of something else. Are we willing to give up our health for comfort? Think of people who work in coal mines or in jobs that are physically punishing to the human body. What would we do to get an education? Would we mortgage? What would we do so our kids could get an education? Would we mortgage the house? Would we take on a second or a third job? Change how we eat and shop and spend money? What would we pay for our freedom? And what does freedom look like? Does freedom mean a lack of all rules and laws? Is it anarchy? Is that freedom? Or is freedom living in a covenanted community, freely gathered, where there are rules, or at least expectations, around our behavior? Do commonly accepted, culturally approved rules infringe on our freedom? Are speed limits oppressive? So what are we willing to pay for security? In our homes, we shell out money to security firms who put little magnetic doodads all over the place, and cameras sometimes. Well, cameras mean we lose some of our privacy in order to feel safe. If we get lost, we have our GPS in our phone, which of course lets somebody somewhere know where we are. So if we're thinking of going someplace where nobody knows, that's not going to happen. We are willingly, as my father would have said, carrying around the little tag that they put on the bear, right, to track the bear in the hibernation thing. We pay thousands of dollars for fancy little sparkly tags so people know where we are. Regionally, we sacrifice our tax dollars for things that make us safe. Guardrails on roads, airplanes, safety equipment, that kind of stuff. Nationally, we are willing to sacrifice the lives of our young and some not so young soldiers to keep America safe, or at least to support our political and economic interests at home and abroad. For a young person graduating high school without a scholarship and no way to pay for college, they are sometimes willing to give up 4 years of their lives in the armed services to get access to a college education or advanced skills training program. They are literally willing to pay with their lives in order to get access to an education. That's how much they value that education. On the international stage, the United States is willing to use our resources, including our soldiers, to engage in programs even when we know we will lose significant numbers of people in order to thwart the plans of our adversaries. In that case, we are paying a high price, indeed, to punish another's behavior. Perhaps the offender was unfair to us or to our allies. We decide individually and as a larger community what price we are willing to pay for what thing we value. As a nation, we have decided that dozens of dead children is the price we are willing to pay for unrestricted access to firearms. 9 people shot down studying their Bible at Mother Emanuel Church, 50 dead in a gay club in Orlando, 60 at a country music concert in Las Vegas, and 26 more last week in a little Baptist church. Thousands of people are killed every month in gun violence in America. And as a nation, we have decided that we are willing to let some police behave badly in exchange for something we choose to call peace. Over 1,000 people have been killed by police in the United States so far this year. We have decided that we would rather have shiny and powerful machines of war than pay for the care of veterans who fight those wars. We have decided as a nation that the best way to honor the armistice and the soldiers who fought in that war or any war is to have car sales and marathons and concerts on Veterans Day weekend. Reinhold Niebuhr talked about human morality as behaving differently upon whether we are alone or in groups. His seminal book, Moral Man in Immoral Society, really says it all. We who consider ourselves moral beings will sometimes fail to act when we are in a group if no one else is acting. We are able to engage a sort of mental filter that removes troublesome things from our area of concern. Douglas Adams called it the somebody else's problem filter. Oh, someone will get that. It seems like a problem, but I'm a stranger. Maybe this is how things work here. Nobody else is complaining. It must be the accepted way of things. Perhaps I'm imagining it. And sometimes we decide that tranquility is worth more than speaking out against injustice. Speaking out is to take a chance, to risk being unpopular, to go against the grain, drawing attention to an embarrassing thing. Perhaps the emperor has no clothes. Who wants to say it out loud? So sometimes seeing injustice is the price we pay for our own emotional safety and comfort. I attended a workshop one time on conflict management in congregations, and the presenter offered this observation. If there is a thing, a disruptive thing perhaps, that happens in your annual congregational meeting, or every year at the holiday fair, whatever it is, if there's this disruptive or inappropriate thing that happens, and it has happened for 3 years or more, the congregation as a body, spoken or unspoken, has decided that that behavior is permissible. I can tell you the congregational leaders were not happy to hear this. So considering what we bought or not last night at the auction, what does that bring up for us? What is it we want but perhaps cannot afford to pay what the price is? What is it that we are willing to pay in resources or ethics or virtue to maintain our own comfort? I hate to keep coming back to it, but it hasn't changed, so I need to address it, and that is that we live in trying times. These are the kinds of times that require us to make decisions based upon what we value and how much we value it. So this week, I invite you to examine that sort of internal balance sheet and consider if it represents what you want in yourself. Am I willing to risk being uncomfortable in order to have this thing? To do that is to risk vulnerability. Is the benefit worth the risk? And factor in all the surrounding feelings as well. If I do this thing, right, that my risks are A, B, and C. But if I don't do it, what do I risk? Right? If there's this brave thing, what are my risks? People will laugh at me. I'll be alone. Lose my social standing. But if I don't do it, what are my risks? Will I regret my actions? Will I regret my failure to act? Now, as you go through your week, I invite you to consider these questions. When you are faced with a choice that challenges you, be mindful of your feelings and your emotions, that anxiety level that happens as you make your decision. Notice what role reason plays in it and how quickly reason moves aside in favor of emotions. And how does our daily decision-making reflect our values? It is deep work to do. May such mindfulness ever be our practice and our prayer. Blessed be, and amen.